Hi, my name is Tom Harnett. I work for Alstom. I'm part of the safety management team, and I'm here today to basically give you some information on the Wayside Training 3.0. You may have seen me in recordings such as Wayside and Wayside 2.0. So this should be the final update for the testing and commissioning phase and the construction phase of this project. We've made several changes to how we run the top permit system and the lockout tagout system. So today we're going to go over through all the information quickly, but we're going to focus on the changes that we've made over the last couple months to make this system more efficient and remain as safe as possible for the workers and the contractors involved. So thank you for your time, and I hope this is informative and you enjoy it. Okay. So Wayside is the 3 meters area from the outside of rail, and that remains the same. Wayside is 3 meters. Once you're inside that 3 meters outside the rail, you're considered to be part of Wayside, and you are working in the Wayside. The project right now, everything is energized. There's a whole bunch of new things going on. Everything's ramping up. We're getting ready for the final testing and commissioning. Then we can hand it over to revenue service and be operational. So some of the things we're doing right now, we're doing train testing. The drivers are still training. They're out there testing the trains. There's a new crew of drivers coming in for August. So we're going to have some new drivers out there training and testing as well. We're doing signal training and signal testing. So basically making sure that the signals are working the way they should as trains or LRVs go up and down this track, to make sure that the intersections do what the intersections are supposed to do, the PED crossings do what the PED crossings are supposed to do. So this is part of that signaling testing. We're also doing pinch loop testing, which is running trains back and forth through different stations so that we can make sure that they can function as they're supposed to in operations, making sure that we can the two console trains, so two trains connected together, to make sure that there's enough timing to go through intersections and all those sort of things. There's oscillation testing going on, so we're testing the track for comfort. We have to make sure that the track runs smoothly. And then also on top of that, we're trying to finish the construction. So there's paving. I think the paving is just about done, but there's paving that had to be done. Landscaping still involved. There's still some little bit of concrete work. There's still some work at a little bit of work at stations. So there's a lot of activities going on right now. And we all know with more activities, there's more potential and there's more risk out there for these activities interfering with each other. So today we're going to talk about how to keep you safe on the rail and around the rail, and then how to protect those trains and public. So that's what we're going to get into. So like we were saying, Wayside, 3 meters from the outside rail. Wayside permitted area. So after initial energization, which has been done, the area would now be considered energized and Wayside permitted. This means you require a task-specific permit or be signed on to the daily authorized TOP as issued by the OCC for the non-active Wayside. So basically what we did is we cut the area up. So wherever there's train testing and signal testing and pinch loop testing, we call that the active Wayside. So that's where the trains will remain, and that's where they'll be going back and forth. The rest of the area, the rest of the alignment, we basically call the general area, and we put it under a daily authorized permit. And so as we go, I'm going to tell you exactly how these two different zones, the active zone versus the daily authorized zone, the general zone, I'm going to tell you how they work and what we need to do to be working in them safely. So we're going to get into that as we go. So active Wayside, an area inside the permitted Wayside where trains are operating frequently. This area will be used for train testing and or driver training, signal training, pinch loop training. The transit zone is an area of the Wayside where a train may pass through during shunting or relocation, typically from the stabling facility to an active Wayside area. Trains are required to travel at a restricted speed of 15 kilometers an hour. OCC will notify workers in the, we'll call them concern areas. So like if we have workers in the elevated guideways areas or the tunnel or the bridges, as you can see, Obviously, we can't have those workers remain if we're going to shunt the train through, so transit the train through at low speeds, because there's no room for those people to be there. So OCC would have to get hold of those people and remove them from those areas, or at least put them in a safe position so that that train can pass safely. Okay, so that's the 3 different areas we were talking about. So this commitment to safety here. So reporting of safety concerns, including near-miss events, is positively encouraged, and retaliation against persons reporting will not be tolerated. We had to report everything out there. If it's a concern or it's a danger, a hazard, it has to be reported so it can be mitigated. We can't leave something there if it's going to hurt somebody else or damage something. Project site life critical rules and environmental absolutes are followed for the Wayside permitted area. If I'm assuming you've been on this project for a while, a lot of us have. We all know about these life critical rules, and basically, in the Wayside, if your commitment in the Wayside, we follow the MEPI, the Mobile Equipment Personal Interface Rule, which is rule number 12, which means any person that interferes with mobile equipment, it would be considered life critical for mobile equipment interfaces. I'll explain that a little bit better in a minute. Your commitment, your safety program. This orientation is designed to inform workers of hazards present in the Wayside permitted area and the mitigations put in place to mitigate those hazards and keep the workers safe. Non-compliance with the Wayside procedure will be deemed a breach of LC number 12 MEPI, which I was talking about. So basically what happens if there's a breach of that MEPI, we suspend the work immediately on the Wayside. We open up a life critical investigation, either Alstom or CJV, whoever is the, let's say, the owner of that contractor. And then the investigation will go through, and then once the investigation findings come out and it's complete, then we go from there. The objective of this orientation is to inform all those assessing Wayside permitted areas of the risks and precautions necessary to protect themselves from train movements and other rail risks, as well as to explain the top process. We want to tell you how the top process works. No work shall commence without having a task-specific track occupancy permit, which includes lockout tagout work. So for any work that's going to happen that we need a lockout tagout, that's a special permit, and there's going to be a task-specific top that has to go with it. Okay, and that's anywhere we need a lockout tagout. There are task-specific tops will also be needed for work in the active zones, as well as any specialized work where there's new hazards introduced to the line. For example, if we were doing landscaping and we use an excavator, and that excavator had the potential to swing into the right-of-way of the train, into that Wayside permitted area, obviously we would have a task-specific permit for that with special mitigations to spot that excavator to ensure that it doesn't encroach that Wayside, right? Because you don't want to put anybody in jeopardy. Okay. Never take shortcuts while working on the Wayside permitted work area, as this has the potential and may lead to a severe injury or life-altering situation. If you're unsure of how to perform an activity, stop, think, and act. Questions, concerns, comments, reporting of injuries, hazards, incidents, near misses shall be directed to the OCC office. There's 2 numbers for the OCC, which will be up on this slideshow. I'm sure everybody has them. Actually, there's going to be 3 numbers now. We are going to introduce an emergency line in the OCC. That will come as a communication from the OCC once that phone is obtained, and the number is. Contractors and management will get that number, and that will be a special number for emergencies, so that we do have that direct feed into OCC in case of emergency. So that's coming as well. Never assume it's okay to proceed in the Wayside permitted area. Confirmation is required by OCC Operational Control Center daily to access the approved work locations. So one of the rules that never changed is when you do have a task-specific permit, or you are signed on to the daily authorized permit, you still have to call into the OCC when get approvals to enter the Wayside. So they have to track that. So when you phone in, they know you're there, where you are, what your work scope is, and you're finding your contact number just in case. That's still a rule. When you leave for the day, you have to call out. You have to call the OCC and let them know you're going to. We need to know where you are. If you're there, we need to know. And if you're not there, we also need to know. Emergency purposes alone, it's a very very strict rule. Okay. Call OC. Oh, so here it goes. Call OCC at the end of the day to report out. Fitness for duty. So this is important. Every company has it. We're in the summertime now. We're in the midst of heat waves. I mean, fitness for duty is very important. So fit for duty includes a zero tolerance for alcohol. Right? Can't do that. Drugs, illegal or prescription drugs, doesn't matter. You have to make sure you're doing the right thing. Fatigue comes into a factor in the summer with the longer days and the hotter days. Illnesses, can affect your ability out there. We need to make sure COVID's still a thing. I mean, it's not as rampant as it was, but COVID is still here, and we need to protect other workers from that. Stress can be a big thing. We're at the end of the job. There's a lot of things going on. We're working in the heat, longer hours trying to get this thing done. Job stress, family stress, life stress, all affects your judgments. And if any of these, if you're dealing with any of these, you should be talking to your supervisor and having an honest chat with them and letting them know what kind of a place you're in, because, and in some cases in these safety sensitive positions, we need to make sure that we don't put somebody there that can't make the right call. Okay. Events that occur on Wayside will be subject to investigation and may have post-incident testing. That's a Trans Ed rule. It's an Alstom rule. Most companies have it. Post-incident testing is a normal thing. So it will be, a lot of the times it will be mandated. Refer to Trans Ed Life Critical MAPI number 12. Again, it's just another reference to that Life Critical rule. Current status, like we said, currently the entire alignment is considered energized. So basically, if we wanted to, we could drive a train from 102 Street on the north end all the way to the Millwood stop down on 28 Ave, right? So, yeah, we can do it, and everything's energized. With energy comes potential, comes risk. We're going to talk about that as well. Currently, a task-specific top will be required to be signed or be signed on to the daily authorized top. So that's what we talked about, splitting those two things, the active zone versus the general zone. And if you're in the daily authorized top permit area, all you have to do is call in and give them 4 points of information, and you can be signed in there to do your tasks, as long as it follows the stipulations to be in the general area. For example, lockout, tagout, you're not intruding, you're not doing any permanent work on the rail that you can't move. You need to be able to, if you had a call from the OCC, you need to be able to move your work area away from the track to let a train transit through. That's another stipulation. So the two areas, task specific for the active and lockout, tagout, and then you have your general daily authorized top. An update to the Wayside procedure has just been implemented, and all contractors and supervision will be expected to review it. So that has been sent out, that update. Today, actually, we're going to, there's a document being released to the OCC. Today is the 28th of July. And there's a couple right at the end here. We're going to talk about them, these two communications that are coming out today, which you will receive when you come to the project, or if you're already on the project, you will receive them anyway from your managers and supervisors. So basically at 2 p.m. or 1400 hours every day, an OCC communication will be forwarded to the project to outline the active and non-active areas for the following day's shift, starting at 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So there's two. It will also contain the non-active permit number. So what it will do is it'll tell you where your trains are going to be running the next day. So now you can plan your work. So if your work area is inside where the trains are running the active zone, you know you need a task-specific permit. If you know you need locker tagout, you know you need a task-specific permit. If you know where the trains are running, you also know where the trains aren't running. And that falls into your non-active area and your daily authorized top permit. And then you know where that work is, so you know you can sign on to that. And you don't need those task-specific permits unless it falls into that the previous criteria. Okay. Zero tolerance should be upheld for those disregarding rules while working in the Wayside permitted areas. Very important, guys. We're trying to protect you from a moving train, and now the trains are running at full speeds, right? So you have trains running at 55 kilometers an hour, 60 kilometers an hour, 30 kilometers an hour. We can't afford to have people not following the rules out next to these trains, especially in the active zones. So, I mean, we are going to be very strict about making sure people are following these rules, and the people that don't follow the rules, they'll be looked at very sternly, okay? Because they're putting themselves or others in harm's way. So the hazards out there, so there are many hazards on the rail system. Any rail system has hazards. The ones we're going to talk about today are moving trains, so up to 80 kilometers an hour. So that's, I should have edited that. I think they brought the speed down to 70K now across the bridge. But operating up to 70 kilometers an hour, they're electric. Therefore, they're very quiet. 22 tons per car. They're fast, silent, and heavy. I mean, you can't get any more serious than that. The overhead catenary system, energized at 750 volts. It's capable of pushing 20,000 amps. 20,000 amps. 100 milliamps can kill a man or a woman. Can you imagine what 20,000 amps can do? So again, another big hazard out there that we've been really taking seriously and making sure that we're doing the right thing. Again, on the end, there's a couple of things we're going to talk about. Slip and trip hazards on the rails and cables. Walking on the track is not permitted inside the permitted areas. We're not allowed to walk. We're not allowed to walk on the track. We can walk over the track. We can work around the track, but we shouldn't be walking on the rails. That's one thing we shouldn't do. Okay. Obviously for slip and trip reasons. I mean, it's not the biggest of hazards, but it's a hazard. The bigger one is the rail switches remotely operated. Now, I'm going to mention this here, and at the end, there's an actual communication we're going to go through about these rail switches and what we're going to do about them. But basically, the rail switches are now capable of being operated remotely. So what's the hazard there? Well, if you were working inside that switch area and that switch unintentionally moved over, what would you think would happen? What's going to happen to your feet that's caught, or the equipment that's caught, or somebody that's kneeling down? Absolutely. The potential and the risk is there. Therefore, we have to mitigate it. At the end of the slideshow here, the last couple slides, we're going to go through the mitigations for that hazard and that risk. Live road traffic at crossings and on the street alongside, designed to run with traffic. So this whole system basically is on the ground. It's designed to run with traffic. So obviously, we introduce members of public and we introduce traffic as a big hazard. So it's been a big hazard the whole time, and it will continue to be a big hazard. So we have to watch ourselves where we're working. In areas where we don't have a wayside, for example, let's say 95 Ave, the track runs straight down the middle of the street. So if there was a train coming, where would you move? Where would you go? Right? 2 trains coming, you got to get off both sets of tracks. You're going to be walking out in the street for protection, so that's not good. So in areas like that, we need a better game plan. We can't just let people work wherever they want to work without a game plan. Okay. Construction risks associated with your own task. So you still have your own risks. Whatever you're doing has risks. And then you also have to worry about the train risks on top of it. And then you also have to worry about other contractors in the area. So now you got your own risks. You got the train and the wayside risks. Then you have the other contractors in the area. So there's a whole bunch of things you have to think about when you start your job. And just like that, other construction activities in the same area. Okay. Pedestrian interaction. Yeah, we've seen a lot of that. Obviously, down in the south end, there's not as much pedestrian interaction. As you start heading north to downtown, a lot more interaction. Sometimes it's polite and friendly. Sometimes it's not. What we do have to remember is that we're members of this project and we're professionals, and we have to act professionally. So be polite. Remind them it's a live train area and they can't be there. Report it to the OCC that they're there. If they don't leave, report to the OCC. OCC will get hold of EPS or whoever they have to get hold of to come and deal with that person themselves. But remember, we have to remain polite and professional. Don't engage in any aggressive engagements. Back away from the scene and try to protect yourselves. Okay. So here's a quick diagram of the wayside. Beautiful diagram. Look at that. Look how simple that is. We got the 3 meters on the left. You got the 3 meters on the right. You got your median in the middle. You got your 2 tracks. The street is way out there. Perfect. Looks so simple. Not so much. So our alignment does not look as easy as this for a lot of the times. A lot of the times it runs in the middle of the road. There's elevated guideways, there's tunnels, there's bridges, there's hills, there's sound walls on the sides of us. A lot of the times it's tricky to get in these areas and make yourself protected. But this is basically what we're talking about when we talk about the wayside permitted area. It's that 3 meters, okay? So walking across the tracks, right? Simple activity, but there are hazards presented as you walk across rail. So if practicable, always use an authorized pedestrian crossing, bridge, or level crossing. That's the safest way of doing it. Is it feasible all the time? Does it make sense? Is it logical? If you're a kilometer away from the nearest crossing, are you going to walk the kilometer to walk back? I don't think so. You're going to have to walk across that track in some situations. Some basic rules for walking across the track, okay? I know, but I got to say them anyway. If there's no crossing close by either direction, only cross where there's adequate sighting distance in both directions. So minimum of 30 seconds, they say. So basically, you want to make sure there's no trains headed your way, and you can see far enough ahead that you know that that train isn't coming around a corner or coming over a hill and is going to surprise you. Ensure there's a position of safety on the far side. Don't cross the track if there's nowhere to stand on the other side. That's not safe, because if a train comes, now what are you going to do? Right? You're going to you just put yourself in another spot. So make sure there's somewhere to go on the other side of that track, and you're not going to be putting yourself in one of those spots, the crush points, pinch points, line of fire, whatever you want, whichever way you want to say it. Check in both directions for approaching trains. Right? Just like when you're crossing the street. I have a 6-year-old. These are the same rules I use when I cross the street. Look both ways. Make sure there's no cars. Make sure there's, make sure there's somewhere to go on the other side. Walk directly across, not diagonally. Do not step on the rail. This is about being efficient. If you walk diagonally, it's going to take you a lot longer to walk, and then you have your back to one side of the train or another. Like it's either coming from behind you or forward, and there's 2 tracks. So either way, you got your back to the train. So walk directly across, get to where you're going, and get off that track. Makes sense, right? Avoid crossing at switches and switch rails can trap feet. This, again, I'm going to talk about this at the end. This is a big one. If you're going to cross the track, don't cross at the switch point. Why would you put yourself there? Why would you put your foot there? Right now, we're in testing commissioning. You know what testing commissioning means? We're trying to make the system work, and we're trying to find the bugs and get it all working properly. Is there a chance for unintentional switching? Yeah, there's human error. There's logic in the controllers. There's all sorts of ways that it could happen. So why would you put yourself there? Okay. Do not enter tunnels or areas such as elevated guideway with OCC approval and safety factors in place. So that's the task-specific permits, right? If we're out running trains for those areas. So when you talk to the OCC, they will guide you. They will help you. If you're not sure and you say, hey, I want to work here, they will let you know, hey, is this an active zone? Is it a general zone? Is it under authorized top permit zone? They'll let you know if you don't already know, okay? So there is that safety factor involved too. But as somebody that's working, you should know the hazards. You should know what you're getting into. Don't depend on somebody else for your safety. So the daily authorized top shall operate as instructed below. So this is how the permits work, okay? So at 2 p.m. each day, OCC Deputy Manager Designate shall issue the daily authorized top via email for the following day and night for areas where trains are not operating. Communicate the active wayside areas to contractors. So 2 areas. Authorized top area, which is the general where there's no train movements. There may be a chance of transit zones, but so remember that. And then the other zone will be the active wayside with the train testing, pinch loops, and the signal testing are on. Prior to commencement of the work scope, the supervisor lead must call in and report the following. So so daily authorized top number. So when you phone in, you're going under the daily authorized top, you have to give the OCC the top number so they know you read it, in which the crew is performing the work under. Name of the company. We need to know who's there. Contact name and number. If there was something that we needed to reach out and grab you, we need your contact number. We need your name and your number of the supervisor in charge of the work that's there. Location. We need to know where you're working, where you put what pole, A13 to A15. Good. Now we know where you are. Work scope, including the equipment. We need to know what you're getting into. We need to ensure that the work that you're phoning in to do, or radioing in, or phoning in, sorry, is actually work that's acceptable in that area. Like if you phoned in with a lock or tag, we'd say, no, you can't be under the general permit, the daily authorized top. You have to get a task-specific permit. So that allows the OCC to ensure that you're doing the acceptable jobs in those areas. OCC shall record an information provided by the supervisor lead and will subsequently approve or deny the access. So once you give that information, OC still has that right to approve or deny. Supervisor lead must call out when the work is complete. So when you're done for the day, you got to call out. You got to let OCC know you're not there anymore, because then we don't, emergency purposes, we know you're gone. We don't have, when you're not there, we don't get calls saying, where are these guys? We just need to know for tracking purposes to keep you safe and make sure that we're aware of what's going on site. Active wayside. So the task-specific top shall operate as instructed below. So at 2 p.m. each day, again, OCC deputy manager shall communicate the active wayside area to the contractors. Contractors who request work activity in the active wayside must adhere to the following stipulations for their task-specific top to be approved. So this is very important. If you're going to be working in the active wayside, which a lot of construction activities are happening right now, please be very careful and listen closely. No work activity shall occur closer than 1.2 meters from outside of the rail. So 3 meters is your wayside. But what we're saying, if you're working in the active zone and you have that task-specific permit, you are now allowed to work at 1.2 meters from the outside of rail. That gives contractors more room inside, and they can finish off their construction activities inside. So it makes it easier for you guys to get your work done. But being that close to the rail obviously increases the risk. So spotters are required to ensure workers do not breach that 1.2. So if you're in the active wayside with a task-specific permit, you need a spotter. That spotter is to make sure that none of your workers go past that 1.2 and they don't breach this active wayside rule, because we know what breaching does. That'll open that life critical event. Okay. Proper barricades delineation must be erected prior to work activity at the said point of 1.2 meters from the outside of rail. This barricade delineation should be non-metallic and must be clearly visible to the train drivers day and night. So we need to set up flagging, delineation, tape. It has to be visible in the night and day, so lights may have to be used for nighttime activities. Set up at 1.2 with a spotter, right? So now there's a physical barrier between the work site and the track side, okay? And that's the whole point. And then it says flashing lights must be affixed to barricades delineation for night work activities. We need to make sure that these train operators can see where these activities are going on. And with the lights on the barricades, they can see, first off, where the activities are happening and make sure that no one crosses that line as they drive by at speed. Right? Okay. Frequently asked questions. So once we rolled out this plan, I mean, there was a whole bunch of questions. So we'll go through these questions quickly. Can I work in active wayside using the daily authorized top? No, you can't. Work in the active wayside must be completed using a task-specific top. Please do not call OCC and ask for special exceptions. There is no exceptions. If you're in the active zone, you need a task-specific top. Do I have to set up barricades delineators if I'm working under the daily authorized top in the non-active wayside? What do you think? Do you need the 1.2 meter delineation if you're working in the general top, daily authorized top? The answer is no. Barricades are not needed. It's only needed in the active zones. If you're in the daily authorized zone, there's no train movement, and you're allowed to work on that track as long as it follows, adheres to the stipulations in the previous slide. Can you work on the daily authorized? Who can work on the daily authorized top? Any contractor with current wayside training whose work location and scope meets the requirements on the type of top. You need the TransEd 2022 orientation sticker on your helmet, or you're not allowed to be on site. And then you have to follow the stipulations. Can I use on-rail equipment or derailers while using the daily authorized top? No. When working on the daily authorized top, the scope of work and equipment used must not impede trade movement. So we're not allowed to have those derailers, because if we have the transited train through, that adds hazards for the train operations. When can I submit a task-specific permit? After 1,400 hours for work commencing the following day or night. Can I put in a weekly permit and my scope of work will not change? No, these are daily permits only. The active wayside may change daily, right? So we need to do these permits daily to match the changes to our active waysides. That's why we changed it. It was too hard to predict a week of look ahead, so we changed it to a day look ahead, which seems to be working. So we are getting a lot of success with it. Can I submit a weekly walking permit? Yes, you can. You can get a weekly walking permit now. You can get that face-to-face up at the OCC, or you can email it in and get it approved. Do I need a permit to work at stops and stations? If your work area is entirely on the stop platform behind the yellow tactile strip, a top is not required. So if you're behind that yellow, well, it's called a tactile strip, but it looks like yellow bubble wrap on the end of the stops. If you're behind that, you do not need a top, okay? And then you also got to remember that if you're going to encroach that 3 meters of the lockout tagout around the OCS, then you'll need a lockout tagout. If you need a lockout tagout, you need a top, okay? So there are stipulations there. Why is there a train in the daily authorized top area? The areas identified on daily authorized top may be considered as a transit zone at any time. OCC may park an LRV there at the stop station along the alignment at any time. So we use it for storage. We transit trains there. If we have to get to a particular area to be active, we have to operate the train there. Therefore, we would have to transit through those non-active areas. Do I need a permit to work in the wash bay or Avis building? Yes, both areas are required a top. They may be covered by the daily authorized top if lockout, tagout, rail-mounted equipment and derailers are not required. So you may need a task-specific permit if it falls into that category, or it may just fall in under the daily authorized top permit if your stipulations are met. So roles, responsibilities. Here's your 2 OCC numbers right now. So these are the 2 call-in lines for work. 587-921-7924. And 587-930-2243. Remember, there's going to be a third line, an emergency line that's coming right away. We're getting it procured right now. Once we do receive that emergency line, and a communication will go out through the OCC with the rules and responsibilities of using the emergency line and the number itself. So that will be coming soon. So Operational Control Center, the OCC, controls all train movement. They approve and deny access and work activities in the wayside. They manage the train system. That's what they do. Communicates action in the event of emergency or other situation that may require their attention within the wayside permitted areas. They're the guys, they're the team, sorry. Anything, all concerns and hazards and injuries and events and questions and emergencies all run through the OCC. They are the train management team. Transporting trains to the transit zone will not require site wardens. So site wardens are right now at this point they're obsolete. They're not used anymore. Informs and notifies the project contractors and subcontractors of upcoming train testing and driver training and active zones at the specific locations daily. So around 2 p.m. I'm not going to promise you it's going to be at 2 p.m. on the button. Sometimes it's a little bit later because we have to get other game plans. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of teams that need to talk about what they need the next day, and sometimes that goes a little bit late. But 2 p.m., 1,400 hours is the aim, and for the most part, it comes out pretty close to that, okay? And that comes out to the OCC email project-wide. They approve walking inspectors, specific work location and times. They will request two-person walking inspections in special areas, active zones. The tunnels would need a 2-person walking inspection. You don't want to send anybody in there alone. Okay. All personnel and vehicle movement on Wayside shall be communicated and approved by the OCC. Approves and denies task-specific permits for work in the active Wayside. If lockout tagging is required, we'll ensure through the tagging authority if approved isolation document is approved. So basically, lockout tagout and the OCC have to work together when there's lockout tagout requirements. The walking inspecting guide, we're going to skip this slide. That we just go off the new top process. The position of safety. So 1.2 meters is the minimum distance that objects need to be away from their outside of rail to contact. 1.2 is the closest that any work will get to the track in the active wayside. Delineation and changeage is required to set up at 1.2 meters and a spotter prior to commencement of the work in the active wayside. Spotter is required for all work in the active wayside. For work at nights, the delineation must be visible and have lights. So that was just a rehash of what we need for this active, what the position of safety is now. So basically, if you see on the screen there, the 3 meters up here, where am I? Right here. The 3 meters, that's the wayside. 1.2 meters is the closest you're going to get to it in the active wayside with the barriers, tape, delineation, whatever you set up there, visible. That's as close as you're going to get is that 1.2, okay? Roles and responsibilities. So supervisor, submit and obtain the task-specific top or call into the daily authorized permit. Ensure all have the required training, so you need all them stickers on your hard hats. That's one of the supervisor's jobs to make sure. Toolbox include the position of safety, the permit details, muster point, communication method. Ensure unattended zones are left suitable for train movement. So you must make sure that if you're going to leave site that you have your everything cleaned up so that train can run through unimpeded. Very important. We move things away from the track. We got to give it clearance. I think it's 30 centimeters. Like let's call it 3 feet. Please remove anything that's 3 feet close to that rail because the train has the potential of hitting it. So if you're not there and the train doesn't see you, we need to make sure that the train path is unimpeded. Okay, and for safety as well. If the train hits something, where's that something going? It's going to go out. So we do not want to put projectiles in the way of the train. Right? Makes sense? Makes sense. Ensure all tools and equipment are accounted for and removed. That's part of the cleaning it up before you leave. We'll ensure all crew members are wearing the proper PPE and following the COVID-19 project protocols. COVID-19 again. There's not many protocols right now. The JHA has been scrapped. However, we still have the mandated not allowed to work if you have COVID. You had to report it to the COVID line for TransEd. We'll ensure the LRVs being transited can move safely through the work area. Roles and responsibilities continued. Must ensure to take reasonable care of their own health and safety. So the workers, I mean, you have to look after yourselves. I mean, we have rules and responsibilities and signage and PPE requirements and all sorts of things to help you. But when it all comes down to it, you have to look after your own safety. You are your own being, and you have to look after you and your coworkers as well. Must immediately report unsafe acts, conditions, accidents, incidents, near misses, property damage to the site supervisor, and then to the OCC. Ensure all tools are accounted for prior to leaving the work location. Understand your 3 rights. So right to know, you have a right to know the hazards and the mitigations used. That's what this orientation is about, let you know what's there and how we're going to fix it or how we're going to save you or safe it out for you. You have the right to participate, which means you have the right to ask questions. You have the right to express concerns. You have the right to add value to a safety meeting. You're allowed. That's part of your rights. If you don't agree with something, you have a right to put your hand up and say it. And then your third right, which is, I mean, most people know this one. It's the right to review, the right to refuse, or the duty to refuse. So if someone put you at a task that you consider unsafe, you have the right and duty to refuse that work. And that could be unsafe for different reasons. That could be unsafe because it's truly unsafe, or it could be unsafe because you don't have the qualification or the training to complete that activity safely. It all counts. So it's better. One of the project rules is stop work authority, which means that you can say at any time, I don't feel safe, or this is not safe, there's a problem, and you can stop that work. There's no repercussions for that. That is a right that you have to stop that work, and we will support you. Alstom EHS, CJV EHS, all of us, any safety department will support you. Management will support you. You have the right to do that, and we support it. Shall adhere to the Wayside and TransEd project's site life critical rules. We talked about that. And shall ensure the orientation sticker is on the hard hats, that everybody has the orientation required to be on this project. HSC shall document and track all attendees at a Wayside training. So that's done online now and tracked well. When required, review HSC applicable documentation. Obviously, if there's special works that goes on and HSC needs to be involved to review those documents to make sure that the safe plan is in place and it works, we will do so. When required, performs inspections and audits the contractor scope of work and ensures they perform the activity as per the JHA and the work instructions. If at location, shall assist with the supervisor in emergency situations. And upon inspection, observation shall notify OCC if top is not present. So if there's any infractions, obviously safety will report that to OCC as well. And then OCC will report it back to safety, and then we'll go look at it, okay? Initiate and conduct incident investigations as required. So the communication, cell phone usage will only take place in those areas deemed safe to do so. So if you are going to be on a cell phone, which I know a lot of people do, it's part of your work, it's part of your communication plan, you have to put yourself in a position of safety. So you have to be away from the track, standing still in a very visible area to protect yourselves and to ensure that the train knows that you are in that position of safety. So you don't, for lack of better terms, you don't trip out the drivers when they're driving by and they don't know what you're doing. OCC is to be used for all call-in regarding incidents near misses, property damage. We've talked about that. Negative public interaction, that also has to be reported to the OCC. Here's a picture of the top permit. A track occupancy permit is basically a work plan. You're going to tell the OCC who's doing the work, when they want to do the work, how they're going to do the work, with what equipment they're going to do the work, where they're going to do the work. All this information is captured on that permit, which means once you fill out that work plan and it's accepted by the OCC, you have to follow that work plan because that's what you put in and that's what was approved. So the part of the job, you guys put the permits in. OCC's job is to review that permit and either approve it or deny it, or put stipulations on it if required. But once it's approved, you have to follow that work plan. All right. Again, another reminder, Wayside personnel who fail to follow the top process Wayside rules should be considered violation of the life critical MEPI. Refer to the MEPI rules, and then it gives you your procedure number, right? I'm not going to read that out, but that's the life critical procedure number. If an incident occurs, contact the OCC right away. Stand down in a safe position. Await directions from the OCC. Contact your supervisor. An investigation will be initiated. Work suspended, awaiting investigation conclusion. Prior to leaving a specific work location, the supervising crew will verify all tools and equipment and material are accounted for and have been removed from the work area. In your toolbox in the mornings, you should be talking about cover all your potential hazards. So the rail hazards, the construction hazards that may be affected in the safe execution of the task. Document all your control factors that will eliminate or mitigate the hazards. Identify any new hazards. Inform all those involved of the top defined work zone. So everybody that's working under this permit, the task-specific permit or the daily authorized permit, they should know exactly what they're signing on to. Everybody should know what their work is and where they're working. Like, we have to make sure that everybody has the information to keep themselves safe. Okay. Movement, position, and storage of equipment is approved by OCC. So if we're going to leave materials on the side of the in the Wayside, OCC has to approve that. Ensure 1.2 meter delineation is present when working in the active zones. Ensure a spotter is present when working in the active Wayside. Communicate the communication method used to alert workers. That sounds weird. So basically, that spotter, if it's a big work zone, they may need a whistle. And when they blow that whistle, that means like, hey, someone's encroaching the Wayside. But they should have a communication plan already thought out for that work. We shouldn't be trying to yell at them if we can't hear them, right? We should have a definite communication plan before we start. Review. Oh, sorry. Review emergency response procedures and muster points. We should know if there was an incident or an emergency type situation. How do we get the ambulance in there? What's the easiest way? What's the game plan? Where's everyone going to stand? Those measures should be talked about in your toolboxes before you start that work. It's too late if there's an emergency. So emergencies, performing duties on Wayside permitted area includes understanding protocol and process during an emergency event. So during an event, immediately assess the situation. Is 911 required, right? Does the guy have a sprained ankle? Do you need an ambulance? Right? You have to evaluate that. Communicate the event to the OCC. So the first call, so there's 2 calls made right away, and they're sort of done at the same time. A call got to go to the OCC to tell the OCC there's an emergency situation, and then you'd have somebody on site would have to call. So once you call OCC, you will make confirmation instructions. OCC will communicate action in the event of emergency services are required. So right now, the supervisor on site will be calling the ambulance. So somebody on that work crew should be calling the ambulance when the supervisor's on the phone with OCC telling them about the emergency. We should have that ambulance coming at the same time. That just makes sense. If emergency services are required, they will assume responsibility on. So once you call emergency services, this is the way it should happen. Okay, this is for an emergency. So emergency happens. Assess the situation. Is 911 needed? Yes. You, our supervisor, calls OCC. Let them know. You over there, please call 911. Let's get an ambulance if the ambulance is needed, or fire department or police, whatever it is. Get that working right now. Somebody, if it's a first aid event, hey, where's the first aider? That first aider should be over dealing with our casualty right now. They should be doing whatever they need to do. On this project, the average response time for emergency service is 7 minutes. So basically, any first aider on this site will be responsible for life-saving first aid only. Stop the bleeding, CPR, and then continue until emergency services arrive. Once they arrive, emergency services take over the site. So once they get on site, they're the bosses of site. They'll tell you what's going on. They'll ask for help, whatever they do. They'll get that guy helped or try to resolve that situation. And then once they leave site again, that responsibility falls back on that supervisor. Okay, so that's very important. So if an emergency did happen, that supervisor should be on the phone with OCC, telling someone to go out and flag down the ambulance, putting everybody back in the safe zone, have a guy looking after the casualty, and then somebody on the phone with 911 as well. Okay, very important that these things are done. Time is critical in an emergency type situation. Supervisor designate shall perform head count to make sure everybody's accounted for. When the scene location has been deemed safe and clear, work location will be transferred back to the supervisor until management or EHS arrive, and they'll be there pretty quickly. EHS informed, investigation initiated. Scene location will remain frozen if safe to do so. You do not remove anything from the scene. You do not touch the scene unless you need to safe it out for emergency services or for your workers, right? You wouldn't leave a bucket in the air. You would break it down. For example, EHS and management will approve the release of the scene. And so it remains frozen until management and EHS releases it. Wayside personnel and the public, when interaction with the public occurs, remain calm. Professionalism is always expected in the employees, contractors, third-party inspectors. We talked about this, right? Don't engage. Don't aggressively engage. Try to calm down the scene. Be polite. Be professional. Back away from anything that becomes aggressive, and then report to the OCC right away. Never allow the public to place themselves in harm's way. So part of our jobs is to make sure that the public don't put themselves in harm's way. Because it's our job not to. So we remind the public, hey, where you are, you're in a construction zone, you're in a rail zone, you can't be here, there's hazards here, please remove yourselves. Most of the time they will, sometimes they won't, and that's when you contact the OCC and you take it further. Inform supervisor OCC of the event. Supervisor OCC will verify if professional assistance is required. Train crew supervisor will be dispatched to the scene and determine next steps. Treat the public, pedestrians, and vehicles with respect. In a professional manner, walk away from the media. So what do we say to the media? No comment. TransEd has a media card, a communications card that has been given out at orientations. so that if you do get approached by media, you could just pass them that card, which will have the communications number on it, and they can deal with the media as they see fit. We are not to address the media. All right, so we're down to the final two slides, or a couple slides here. So we made some, over the last several weeks, I'll give you some background to tell you why this has been done, and then I'll tell you what we did. So early in the project, we noticed that there was concern or a potential, and the potential was actually happening a couple times. So basically what happens is a train with a pantograph on top of the train is running in an energized zone. Now, when it crosses over what's called a tram insulator, which is the insulator between zones, so energized zone on this side, de-energized zone on this side. So the risk was the train drives past this tram insulator, which would be located here, and then unintentionally energizes this area over here for a brief second before it's shorted out or brought to ground. So what we did is we placed barricades so that when the train drove up, they'd see a barricade and they say, oh, I can't go past here. That protected that unenergized zone. As we energized the whole alignment, keeping up with the barricades, because we changed the active zones and inside the active zones, and there's more active zones, like they're separated, it was very, very, very hard to have these barricades placed correctly all the time. So what we've done, once the barricades were removed, we did have 2 events for different reasons that we energized an area. Now, there was no one there, potential was low, but there was still potential, okay? So what we've done is we've instituted the Alstom, get ready, Alstom EHS 003 5.2.2 train intrusion mitigations, right? Say that 3 times fast. So basically, Alstom has initiated a protection plan to mitigate LRV entry into a de-energized zone. The risk introduced when this event happens is the unintentional energization of a de-energized zone. Shorting straps will be placed just inside the de-energized zone as close as possible to those tram isolators. This placement will take any unwanted energy from the OCS to the rail, which will prevent the energy from traveling inside that zone into a work area. So basically, right where the energy goes from energized to de-energized, we're going to put a strap in here so that if the train did pass, the energy that's transferred over would go down the strap to the rail and be shorted back to the power station, right? So that serves one purpose. It shorts out that electricity. The other purpose is on that strap, a large stop sign will be placed. So as the train approaches, it'll see the strap coming down, the big sign there that says stop, and then the train operator will say, hey, I can't go past there. And that will be the physical notification for the train to stop. So it provides 2 purposes. So now that we have the end strapped out so that no electricity can follow into the work zones, good. That's our first level of protection. The second level of protection, as part of the Alstom Lockout Tagout plan and commitment to the Alstom team, will provide work area shorting straps. So basically, contractors are responsible to put shorting straps up around their work zones. So that way, in the event that the shorting straps that we put there didn't work, or there was a lightning storm or whatever, some special reason, though the workers' shorting straps would short it out before it gets actually into the work crew. So that's the second feature. So that's a redundant system. Strap out here, strap beside the worker. Now there's 2 straps to protect you. So it says contractors with training and equipment required will be responsible to install their own shorting straps as required to protect their work areas, which is what I just said. Alstom will open, and so the third feature is Alstom will open, separate, and lock out main breakers of TPSSs when the TPSSs provide potential to energize the lockout tagout work zone. So inside the big old lockout tagout work zone, if there's TPSSs, which is the power stations that have the potential to put power to the line, what Alstom will do is we'll go inside and we'll open the breaker, we'll rack it out, and then we'll put a lock on it so that we can't power it from that TPSS. Okay, I just did a whole lot of hand signals. But that's the third step. That's the third protection we're going to do, okay? So that has been that plan has been rolled out, and that's what we're currently doing right now to protect workers in a lockout tagout area, and protect them from the train rolling in and energizing that work area that they're in. So that was rolled out last week, I believe, and it seems to be all the contractors are feeling good about it. So it's been working. Okay, remote track switch capabilities and injury potential. So I talked about this earlier. I told you I was going to fill you in at the end, and here we are. So the track switch area groundwork will fall under the task-specific permit and lockout tagout requirements to eliminate the potential of injury from unintentional switching during the T&C phase of the project. The switch areas are signed on the outsides of the switching areas. So there's going to be a communication released today, and basically it's going to give you the information on the track switch hazards, and it's going to have the picture of the signs that you have to be aware of. So basically, a track switch is not just one little switch. A track switch is a whole big area where the tracks are overlaid so that when you switch them, that track will switch up and it will take that train in a different direction. So the track switch areas are sometimes 10 meters long. I don't know the actual number. So like 10 meters long, 30 feet, let's say. So what we're worried about is anyone working inside that 30 feet, there's a potential for those rails to switch. And we don't want anybody's feet there, right? Makes sense. On the outside of these switch areas, there's signage, and that signage tells you that now you're entering a switch area. So basically, if you're going to be working inside those switch areas, you will need a task-specific permit to be there, and those switches have to be locked out so that they cannot unintentionally switch on you. Now, that's only for groundwork, for people walking in those switch areas. High rail equipment that drives on them doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, but we have safety features already part of the train system to protect those rails or protect the equipment from the rail switching when there's something on them. What we don't have is protection for the ground workers. So now we do. It's called a task-specific work permit and a lockout tagout for that area. Okay. So some of the reminders, quickly: safety, life critical requirements, environmental absolutes. We follow them even in the Wayside. Stop, think, and act. If you're not sure, if you're confused, you don't get it, there's something you need to ask, who do you phone? OCC. Call them. Ask them the question. It's better to ask them the question than guess or assume something that you're wrong. Okay. Reporting. Who do you report to? If you're in the Wayside under a top permit or the daily authorized permit, you report to the OCC. You can report to your supervisor too. That's cool. But OCC has to be called, okay? So please call the OCC. PPE, follow the project guidelines. That's been a rule since the dawning of this project. Please wear your PPE and the specialized PPE for the specialized work that you may have to do. Documentation. So FLHA, JHA, risk assessment, top permits, lockout tagout permits, being signed on to the authorized daily permit. These are all requirements to be in this, to be in the Wayside permitted area working. Housekeeping. Everybody's job, everybody's responsibility. Keep your work areas clean. Make sure that train can pass. Make sure that if the train is transiting, you can get off that track in the daily authorized area quickly so that train can get through and get to where it needs to go. Remember, transit areas are 15 kilometers an hour maximum, so the train's not going to be flying through at regular speeds. It's going to be slowly going through. You'll hear a horn blast, a couple horn blasts. If you don't see the train already, you'll look up and you'll say, oh, train's here. You'll move. That train will slowly crawl through your work site and then go to where it needs to go. Remote switch areas, very hazardous. We just talked about them. And all daily authorized areas are transit areas unless specific top has been approved. So if you do have work in an authorized area, but you had, let's say you had concrete work and you can't get out of there, you can still do that work, but you're going to have to get a task specific top to do it, okay? Because if we can't transit through, we need to know. And by we, I mean OCC. So this is the decal that should be on your hard hat, right? Driven to Success 2022. If you do not have that, you have not done the orientation, and you are not permitted to be on the project. So go get your orientation sticker. Unless you're with somebody that's been approved to take you as a visitor and have you out there with them. If you're working by yourself or conducting work activities, you need this sticker. That's it. So any questions? Here are 2 emails. So Alstom EHS Management Department, Tom Harnett and Gerald Harvey. You can email us. Most of you have our phone numbers anyway. Our doors are always open. Our phones are always on, just like the rest of the safety team on this project. Thank you for your time. I do appreciate it. Hopefully this was informative too and wasn't too bad. I try to make light of things when I can. And I'll see you out there. Thank you very much for everything and your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.